My son walked into my room at midnight. True heartfelt mother-son bond story. Sometimes, life takes us down roads we never saw coming. For Emma, it was a quiet night after a long day just like any other. She was finally getting a moment to herself, lying in bed, her eyes feeling heavier with each passing second. Raising her son, Leo, alone after a painful divorce hadn't been easy, but over the years they'd built a bond that was in many ways unbreakable. They were more than just mother and son, they were a team, getting each other through the ups and downs, leaning on each other when it felt like the world was too much. Yeah, but that night was different. Just as she was drifting off, Emma heard a soft knock at her door. It was Leo. At 18 he was almost a grown man, on the edge of leaving home for college. And yet, there he was, standing at her doorway looking lost. He asked if he could come in. His voice was quiet, almost unsure. Emma could tell something was weighing on him. As he stepped into her room, Emma felt a sense of worry creep in. What was troubling her son tonight? She could see it in his eyes, the worry, the sadness, maybe even something deeper. She invited him to sit beside her, bracing herself for whatever he might say, her heart pounding a bit faster. Leo looked at her, eyes heavy with a burden he could no longer carry alone. The silence between them was thick. Finally, he spoke up. He asked, "Mom, do you ever think about what happened with Dad?" In that moment, Emma realized this was more than just a simple question. Leo was holding on to something he couldn't shake off. And she knew this wasn't going to be an easy conversation. What could possibly be weighing on him so heavily that he'd come to her in the middle of the night? Emma didn't know yet, but she was ready to listen, because sometimes the hardest stories to tell are the ones we keep buried the deepest. And that night, they were about to uncover one. Leo's troubled entrance. As Leo settled next to his mom, he avoided her gaze, his fingers nervously picking at each other. Emma knew this little habit well. It was something he did when he was holding something in. Her heart sank because whatever he was about to say, she sensed it would be heavy. She waited, her pulse quickening a bit, not wanting to rush him but needing to know what was on his mind. The room was quiet, almost too quiet, as if even the night itself was holding its breath. Finally, after a few moments, Leo's voice broke the silence, soft and uncertain. "Mom, do you think Dad left because of me?" Emma felt like time had frozen. Of all the questions he could have asked, this was the one she'd hoped he'd never have to wonder about. She had thought about this moment before, the moment he'd start questioning things he wasn't responsible for. She fought the urge to react immediately, instead reaching out, placing her hand gently on his, giving him the space to keep talking. She took a breath and asked softly, "Leo, why do you feel that way?" He looked down, his shoulders tense, as if bracing himself. When he finally spoke, his words came out slow, every syllable heavy with the weight he'd been carrying for so long. "I don't know, I keep thinking, maybe if I had been different, if I'd done something differently, maybe Dad would have stayed. Maybe we'd still be a family." The words hung in the air between them, each one landing like a stone in Emma's heart. She felt a pang of guilt, as if somehow she'd failed to protect him from feeling this way. She had always tried to create a safe and loving home for him, even after the separation. But now she realized that no matter how hard she tried, Leo had been carrying this invisible burden, one he hadn't let anyone see. She squeezed his hand, trying to ground him, to let him know he wasn't alone in this moment. "Leo," she started, choosing her words carefully, "what happened between your father and me was complicated. But it had nothing to do with you. None of it was your fault. Not even a little bit. This wasn't something you could have changed, no matter what." Leo glanced up, his face a mixture of sadness and confusion. It was clear that he wanted to believe her, but something inside him wasn't ready to let go of his own guilt. Emma could see there was more he needed to say, so she stayed quiet, creating a space for him to continue. He took a deep, shaky breath. "I see other families sometimes, they're all together, you know. They're laughing, doing normal stuff. And I wonder if they ever have these thoughts, or if it's just me. I mean, I know you've always been there for me, but I keep thinking if I'd been a better son, maybe things wouldn't have gone this way." Emma felt her chest tighten. How had she missed this? How had she not seen the signs of his self-blame? It tore her apart to know that her son, who'd been her rock through so many difficult moments, was carrying such a heavy burden himself. "Leo," she began, her voice thick with emotion, "I wish there was a way I could show you, to make you understand that none of this was your doing. What happened between your father and me, it was complicated. Adults make choices that children shouldn't have to understand. I know that sounds unfair, but some things just aren't yours to bear." She paused, watching him. He looked as if he was fighting a battle within himself, torn between believing her and holding on to his own beliefs about what he thought he'd done wrong. Emma could sense that he wasn't done yet, that he still had more bottled up inside, so she stayed silent, allowing him to keep talking at his own pace. "Mom," he said quietly, his voice barely a whisper, "I don't know how to let go of it. I keep replaying things in my head, like maybe if I'd been different, less trouble or more. I don't know. Normal, then maybe Dad would have stuck around." Emma's heart shattered hearing those words. She could see how much pain he was in, how deeply he had internalized his father's absence. She could almost feel the weight of his self-doubt pressing down on her as well. She knew now, more than ever, that she needed to make him see how wrong he was. With a calm but firm tone, she said, "Leo, listen to me. Every family has its challenges. Just because we don't look like everyone else doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. You're one of the most amazing people I know. You've been my strength through everything, and I couldn't have gotten through those tough times without you. You're not the problem, not even close." But Leo's eyes were downcast, still holding on to his doubts, as if her words were soothing but not quite enough to break through. Emma realized this was going to be harder than she thought. She was going to have to dig deeper to help him let go of this guilt. She was going to have to show him just how much he meant to her, and how little control he'd had over the choices of others. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. "Leo," she began a little more gently this time, "I know it feels like you should have been able to fix things. But you were a kid. It wasn't your job to hold the family together. That's not something a child should ever have to worry about. I know it feels complicated, but the reality is you didn't do anything wrong." Leo seemed to be taking in her words, but Emma could still see the shadow of doubt lingering in his expression. She knew she couldn't make him believe her completely in just one conversation, but she hoped that this could at least be a first step toward him forgiving himself for something that was never his fault. After a long silence, Leo looked up, his eyes finally meeting hers, and asked, "Mom, do you ever regret it? Being with Dad, going through everything?" Emma thought for a moment. She didn't want to gloss over the truth, but she also didn't want him to feel like her life was full of regrets. So she chose her words carefully. "I don't regret it, Leo, because it brought me you. And you're the best thing that's ever happened to me. So no, I don't regret it. Not one bit. One bit." For the first time that night, Leo smiled, just a small hesitant smile, but it was something. And in that moment, Emma felt a small weight lift from her own heart. She realized that, while this conversation was difficult, it was also necessary. They were finally addressing the pain that had lingered unspoken for so long. But she also knew that this was only the beginning. There were still so many layers of guilt and doubt that Leo would need to work through. But Emma was determined to be there every step of the way, to make sure he knew he wasn't alone. The night stretched on as they talked, sometimes in silence, sometimes in hushed voices, each of them opening up a little more, sharing memories and fears, their bond growing even deeper with each passing minute. Emma couldn't help but feel a sense of peace, knowing that despite the past they had each other. And little did they know, this conversation would change everything. The confession. Nah. As the night wore on, Leo's face softened, yet there was still a tension in his eyes, a weight that hadn't lifted. Emma could sense that this was more than just a passing worry. It was a deep-rooted pain he had been carrying for far too long. After a long pause, Leo looked at his mom, almost as if searching for permission to keep going, to finally lay everything out there. Emma gave him a reassuring nod, silently telling him it was okay, that she was ready to listen, no matter what he needed to say. With a shaky breath he began. "Mom, there's more. It's not just Dad leaving that I can't let go of. I keep thinking about the times I felt in the way. Like maybe I was too much trouble, or not good enough to keep him here." Emma's heart ached. She had spent so many years trying to protect him from this very feeling, always reassuring him, always making sure he knew he was loved. But now, hearing him say this, she realized that he'd been struggling in silence, hiding these doubts away. She reached out, placing her hand on his shoulder, hoping to give him strength. "I know it's hard, Leo," she said softly, "but sometimes people make choices that hurt others. And it's not fair. But you're not the reason for any of it. You have to believe that." But Leo wasn't finished. He looked down, as if gathering his thoughts, then glanced back up at her. His voice barely above a whisper. "Mom, I feel like I don't even remember who Dad really was, or why he left. I mean, he just disappeared from my life. I don't know what I did to make him stay away for so long." Emma's mind flashed back to the days after the divorce, those long empty days when she'd done her best to keep everything normal for Leo, all while her own heart was breaking. She had hoped that with time Leo would heal, that he'd forget the pain. But now she could see how wrong she'd been. "Leo," she said, her voice trembling, "sometimes people leave, not because of anything anyone did, but because they're dealing with their own struggles. It's not your job to make sense of that. And it's not a reflection on you. He nodded. But Emma could tell he still didn't fully believe her. She took a deep breath, preparing to share something she hadn't told him before, something she hoped might help him understand. Leo, your dad, he loved you. In his own way he did. But he had things he was dealing with, things he couldn't handle. That's why he left. He wasn't strong enough to be the father you deserved. But you've been the strongest person I know. Do you realize that? Leo's eyes filled with tears. And for the first time, he let them fall. He hadn't cried in front of her in years, but tonight, he was finally letting down his walls. Emma felt her own eyes well up, and she didn't fight it. This was a moment of healing, one that they both needed. Mom, do you think he ever thinks about us? He asked, his voice barely holding together. Emma hesitated. She wanted to give him the comfort he was seeking, but she also knew that honesty was important, especially now. I don't know, Leo. I wish I could tell you he does. But even if he doesn't, you have me. And I'll never leave. You'll always have someone who cares, who understands. I promise. They sat in silence, letting the truth of her words sink in. It was a promise she had made to herself a long time ago, a promise to always be there for him, no matter what. Leo took a deep breath, seeming to find some comfort in her words. I guess I just feel like I don't belong sometimes. Like there's this hole inside me where Dad should be. And no matter what I do, it just doesn't go away. Emma nodded, understanding his pain. She knew that feeling all too well, the empty space that never seemed to fill, no matter how much love or support she tried to pour into it. But she also knew that over time they'd both learn to live with it. Leo, I know it feels like that now. But you're not alone. You have people who love you, who want to see you happy. You have a place in this world, even if it doesn't always feel that way. Leo wiped his tears, his face softened, but Emma could see he still had more on his mind. She waited, giving him the space to continue. I'm scared, Mom. I'm scared that I'll make the same mistakes. What if I hurt people the way Dad did? What if I leave someone behind someday, and they feel the same way I do now? Emma felt a pang of sadness, but also a sense of pride. Leo was worried about the future, about becoming the kind of person he wanted to be. She could see the strength in him, the compassion that set him apart. Leo, she said gently, the fact that you're even asking yourself these questions means you're already on the right path. You're not your dad, you're you. And you have the power to choose who you want to be, how you want to treat people. You're so much stronger than you know. Leo nodded, seeming to take her words to heart. I don't want to be like him, Mom. I don't want anyone to feel like I did. I want to be someone who stays. Emma reached over, pulling him into a tight hug. And you will be. I know it. You're already so much more than you realize. You're kind, and you care about people. That's who you are. And no one can take that away from you. They sat there, holding each other in silence, letting the weight of the conversation settle. For Emma, it was a moment of clarity. She realized that her son was becoming a young man, someone who was facing his fears, looking inward, and finding his own path. And she knew, without a doubt, that he would be okay. Thank you, Mom, Leo whispered, his voice filled with gratitude. For everything. Emma pulled back, looking into his eyes. I'll always be here for you, Leo. Always. No matter what. The two of them sat in silence as the first light of dawn began to seep through the window. They both knew that this conversation had solved everything. But it had brought them a little closer, helped them understand each other a bit more. And as they sat there, side by side, they both felt a sense of peace. Because they knew that, no matter what challenges lay ahead, they had each other. And sometimes, that was all they needed. Reflecting on the past. With the first light of dawn filtering in through the curtains, Leo and Emma sat in a comfortable silence. The room felt heavy with everything they had just shared, yet there was also a certain lightness, a release from the burden Leo had been carrying all this time. Emma knew that their conversation had helped, but she also knew there was so much more beneath the surface, memories and moments that shaped who they were, and where they'd come from. Emma looked over at her son, his face soft and thoughtful. She knew this was a rare moment when he was fully open, and she wanted to share something with him, to give him a better picture of the journey they had taken to get here. She felt a need to bring the past to life, to show him that despite the challenges he was never alone. After a moment she finally spoke. Leo, there's something I've been wanting to tell you about. About what things were like, back then. When it all started to change. Leo looked up at her, curiosity in his eyes. He nodded, silently encouraging her to go on. Emma took a deep breath, letting herself go back to those early days. It was hard, you know. At first I thought I could fix it all. I kept thinking if I just tried a little harder, maybe things would work out. But it wasn't that simple. Sometimes when people are broken inside, no amount of love or effort can fix them. She paused, her eyes distant, memories swirling in her mind. I remember the day I realized it was over. You were at school and I was home, sitting in the kitchen staring at a cold cup of coffee. I felt this emptiness, a loneliness I can't even describe. I knew then that I had to make a choice. I could keep trying to fix something that was already broken, or I could choose to take care of myself, to take care of you. Leo listened quietly, absorbing every word. He had never heard this side of the story before, and he could see the pain in his mother's eyes as she spoke. She had been carrying her own burden all these years, one he hadn't fully understood until now. Emma continued, her voice soft but steady. You were just a kid, Leo. I didn't want you to see the struggle, but I knew you felt it, in your own way. I remember how you'd come to me with your little worries, how you'd ask if I was okay. And I'd tell you I was fine, that everything was fine. But the truth is, it wasn't fine. I was just trying to keep things together. Leo nodded, his eyes filled with empathy. He could see now how hard it must have been for her, pretending to be strong when everything around her was falling apart. He felt a surge of gratitude for the sacrifices she had made, for the strength she had shown, even when she had nothing left to give. I didn't know, Mom, he whispered. I had no idea it was that hard for you. I thought it was just normal. Emma smiled gently, reaching over to squeeze his hand. I know, sweetheart. And that's what I wanted. I didn't want you to see the struggle. But looking back, I wonder if I should have been more open with you. If maybe we could have talked about it, instead of me carrying it alone. Leo shook his head, his expression thoughtful. No, Mom. I think you did what you had to do. And I don't blame you. If anything, I respect you more for it. Emma's eyes filled with tears, and she blinked them away, grateful for his understanding. She could see how much he had grown, how mature and compassionate he had become. In that moment she felt a sense of pride that was almost overwhelming. They sat in silence for a while, each lost in their own thoughts. Finally Leo broke the silence, his voice quiet and introspective. You know, I always thought that one day Dad would come back. I don't know why. I guess I just kept hoping he'd show up, that he'd have some kind of explanation. Emma nodded, understanding his longing. She remembered those early days after the divorce, when Leo would wait by the window, hoping to see his father's car pull up. She had watched his disappointment grow, day after day, until eventually he stopped waiting altogether. I know, Leo, she said softly, and I wish I could say something that would make it all make sense. But the truth is, sometimes people just don't come back. And it's not because of you, or me, or anything we did. It's because of their own choices, their own struggles. Leo looked down, processing her words. He seemed to be searching for something, a meaning he could hold on to, something to fill the emptiness left by his father's absence. I guess. I just want to understand, he said finally. I want to know why he couldn't be here. Why he couldn't be there for us. Emma thought about his words, feeling his frustration, his desire for answers that might never come. She wanted to give him something, anything, to ease his pain. But she also knew that some questions had no easy answers. Leo, she said gently, I don't know if we'll ever understand. But maybe that's okay. Maybe it's enough to know that we have each other. That we've made it this far, despite everything. He nodded slowly, letting her words sink in. For the first time he seemed to accept that he might never get the closure he was looking for. But he also seemed to find a sense of peace in the fact that he wasn't alone. That his mother had been there for him, through everything. After a long pause, Leo looked up at her, a small smile playing on his lips. You know, Mom, I used to think you were invincible. Like nothing could ever break you. But now I see that you're human, just like me. Emma smiled, a bittersweet smile that held both pride and sadness. I'm far from invincible, Leo. But I think ... maybe that's okay too. Maybe it's okay to be human, to have flaws, to make mistakes. As long as we keep moving forward. They shared a look of understanding. A moment that bridged the gap between them, bringing them closer than ever before. In that quiet dawn, they realized that they didn't need all the answers. They just needed each other. Emma felt a wave of relief wash over her. A release of the tension that had been building inside her for years. She realized now that she didn't have to carry it all alone. She had Leo, and together, they could face whatever came their way. And as they sat there side by side, she knew that this was the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with hope, resilience and love. Because no matter what the future held, they would face it together. The emotional bond. As the light of dawn slowly illuminated the room, Emma and Leo found themselves sitting in a quiet moment that felt both raw and comforting. They had just peeled back years of silent pain and questions, and even though the answers weren't always clear, there was a sense of relief. As if a weight had finally been lifted. Emma glanced over at Leo, who was still lost in thought, his eyes reflecting a mix of emotions. She could see that he was different somehow, more at peace, yet still processing everything they'd talked about. She wondered if now might be the time to share something even more personal, something she'd never told him before. After a pause, she took a deep breath and spoke softly. "Leo, there's something I've been meaning to tell you. Something that might help you understand a little more about what we've been through. Why I had to be so strong for both of us." Leo turned to her, his curiosity piqued. He nodded, giving her the space to continue. Emma chose her words carefully, wanting to be honest yet gentle. "I don't know if you remember, but there were times after the divorce when I struggled a lot. It wasn't easy. There were days when I felt like I was falling apart, like I didn't know how I was going to keep going." Leo's eyes widened slightly, as if he was seeing his mother in a new light. He'd always seen her as this pillar of strength, the one who had everything under control. Hearing her admit her vulnerability was both surprising and deeply moving. Emma continued, her voice steady, but filled with emotion. "I would wait until you went to bed. And then I'd sit in the dark, just trying to hold myself together. I didn't want you to see me like that. I wanted you to feel safe, to feel like everything was going to be okay." Leo listened intently, his face a mixture of empathy and sorrow. He could almost picture his mom sitting alone, carrying a burden she never let him see. He felt a surge of love and admiration for her, knowing now just how much she had sacrificed to protect him. "Mom," he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "I had no idea." Emma smiled softly, reaching out to squeeze his hand. "I know. And that's how I wanted it. I didn't want you to worry. You were just a kid, and you deserved a childhood that wasn't weighed down by adult problems." Leo took a deep breath, trying to process everything she was telling him. He had always admired his mom, but now he felt a deeper connection, a sense of understanding that went beyond words. He realized just how much she had done for him, how she had been his shield, his strength, his everything. "You're stronger than I ever knew, Mom," he said quietly. "And I don't know if I'll ever be able to thank you enough for everything you've done." Emma smiled, her heart swelling with love for her son. "You don't need to thank me, Leo. Being your mom. That's the greatest gift I could ever ask for. You've given me strength too, more than you'll ever know." They sat in silence for a few moments, letting the depth of their conversation sink in. Leo seemed to be thinking about something, a question lingering on his mind. Finally he spoke up, his voice hesitant but curious. "Mom. Do you ever think about the future? About what things will be like, when I go to college and everything changes?" Emma's heart skipped a beat at the thought of him leaving. She had known this day was coming, but now, faced with the reality, she felt a pang of sadness mixed with pride. She took a deep breath, trying to find the right words. "Yes, Leo, I think about it all the time," she admitted. "And as much as it scares me, I know it's something you need to do. You've worked so hard, and you deserve to chase your dreams. Even if it means I'll have to learn how to let go." Leo looked down, his expression thoughtful. "I don't know how to leave, Mom. I know I want to go, to experience new things. But I don't know how to leave you. You've always been my anchor, the one constant in my life." Emma felt a lump in her throat, touched by his words. She reached over, placing her hand on his shoulder. "Leo, you're not leaving me, you're just taking a new path. And I'll always be here, cheering you on. You're ready for this, even if it doesn't feel that way now." He looked at her, his eyes full of emotion. "Will you be okay?" She smiled, nodding softly. "I'll be okay. I'll miss you like crazy. But I'll be okay. Because I know you'll be out there, making your way, doing amazing things. And nothing could make me prouder." Leo seemed to relax. a weight lifting from his shoulders. He had been carrying a fear of leaving her behind, of somehow letting her down. But now, he understood that she wanted him to live his life, to chase his dreams without hesitation. They sat together, watching as the sunlight filled the room, casting a warm glow over everything. For the first time in a long time, they both felt a sense of peace, a quiet understanding that no matter where life took them, their bond would remain unbreakable. Emma wrapped her arm around him, pulling him close. "You know, Leo, I used to think that I had to be strong for you. But now I see that we're strong together. We've been through so much. And we've come out stronger because of it." He nodded, a small smile on his lips. "Yeah, we really have." They sat there, holding on to each other, both of them realizing that their bond was something truly special. It was a bond built on love, resilience, and an unspoken promise to always be there for one another. And as they embraced, they knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, just as they always had. Finding peace and reassurance. As the sunlight filled the room, Leo and Emma sat quietly, letting everything they'd shared sink in. The night had been long, filled with difficult truths and vulnerable moments, but somehow, they both felt lighter, almost as if years of silent worries had finally been lifted. Leo looked over at his mom, a soft smile on his face. He felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: peace. A calmness that had eluded him for so many years, a sense of understanding he didn't even know he was searching for until now. He realized he'd been holding on to a lot of guilt, a feeling that somehow, he was responsible for things far beyond his control. But now, sitting beside his mom, he finally saw things clearly. "Mom," he started, his voice gentle, "I just want you to know. I'm sorry if I ever made things harder for you. I know I wasn't always easy to handle." Emma's heart filled with love for her son, and she reached over, taking his hand. "Leo, you have nothing to apologize for. Not a single thing. You were just a kid going through something that no child should have to go through. If anything, I should be the one saying sorry for not being able to protect you from all of it." He shook his head, a hint of disbelief in his eyes. "But you did protect me, Mom. In more ways than I even realized. I know now how much you held back just to keep things together for us. And I don't know if I ever told you this, but thank you for everything." Emma felt a tear slip down her cheek, but this time, it was a tear of gratitude. She'd always hoped that one day Leo would understand just how much he meant to her, how much strength he'd given her without even realizing it. And now, sitting here in this quiet morning light, she knew he finally did. They sat in comfortable silence, just holding hands, letting the warmth of their connection fill the room. After a few moments, Leo's face grew serious, as if he was gathering the courage to ask something he'd been wondering about for a long time. "Mom, do you think Dad ever wonders about us? Do you think he regrets not being here?" Emma took a deep breath, thinking carefully about how to answer. She knew Leo still carried a piece of his father with him, a hope that maybe, one day, things could be different. She wanted to be honest, yet gentle, to give him a sense of closure without rekindling old wounds. "I don't know, Leo," she began softly. "I think maybe in his own way he thinks about us sometimes. But even if he does, that's not something we can rely on. We have to build our own lives, create our own happiness. We can't wait for someone else to come back and fill that space." Leo nodded, absorbing her words. It was clear that this wasn't the answer he'd been hoping for. But he seemed to understand. He looked down, his face thoughtful, as if he was finally letting go of a lingering hope he had held on to for too long. "You're right, Mom," he said quietly. "I can't keep waiting for something that may never happen. I need to move forward, to focus on what's in front of me, on the people who are here now." Emma smiled, feeling a surge of pride for her son. She could see the strength in him, a resilience that had grown over time, shaped by the challenges they had faced together. She knew now that he was ready to take on the world, to face whatever lay ahead, with a heart full of courage and a mind at peace. "That's all I've ever wanted for you, Leo," she replied gently. "To know that you're enough just as you are. That you're loved, no matter what." They shared a look of deep understanding, a silent promise that no matter where life took them, they would always be there for each other. Emma knew that this moment was one they would both carry with them for the rest of their lives, a reminder of their unbreakable bond, forged in love and resilience. After a while, Leo looked out the window, watching as the world slowly came to life outside. The colors of the sunrise painted the sky in hues of pink and gold. A symbol of new beginnings, a reminder that every day was a chance to start fresh. It's beautiful, isn't it? He murmured, his voice filled with a quiet wonder. Emma nodded, a soft smile on her lips. Yes, it is. And so are you, Leo. Don't ever forget that. They sat there, watching the sunrise together, both of them feeling a sense of peace they hadn't felt in years. And as the light filled the room, they knew that they were ready to face whatever the future held side by side. For Emma, this was more than just a conversation. It was a turning point, a moment of healing that had been a long time coming. She had spent years trying to hold everything together, trying to be strong for her son. But now she saw that strength wasn't about never breaking. It was about picking up the pieces and finding a way to keep going, to keep loving, to keep believing. And as she looked over at Leo, she felt a sense of pride that words could never capture. She had raised a young man who was compassionate, thoughtful, and brave. A young man who understood the power of forgiveness, of moving forward, of letting go. Leo glanced over at her, his face soft and peaceful. Thank you, Mom. For everything. I know now that I don't need all the answers. I just need to keep going, to keep believing in myself. And I wouldn't be here if it weren't for you. Emma squeezed his hand, her heart full of love. You've always had that strength inside you, Leo. I just helped you see it. And I'll always be here, no matter where life takes us. They shared a quiet smile, a silent understanding that words could never capture. And as they sat together, watching the sunrise, they knew that this was the beginning of something new. A chapter filled with hope, with love, and with the unbreakable bond they had forged through every challenge, every hardship, every moment of doubt. Because in the end they were more than just mother and son. They were a team, a pair of hearts that had faced the storms and come out stronger on the other side. And as they looked out at the world, they knew that whatever lay ahead they were ready. Because they had each other. And sometimes, that was all you really needed. As the sun rose higher, filling the room with a gentle warmth, Emma and Leo knew it was time to start a new day, but they also knew that something had changed between them. They weren't the same people they had been last night. They were stronger, closer, and more at peace than ever before. Emma watched Leo with a sense of pride and awe, marveling at how far they had come together. From those difficult days of the divorce, through years of struggles and growth, they had made it to this moment. And now she knew that no matter where life took them, they would always be connected in a way that nothing could break. Leo, she said softly, I just want you to remember that you're never alone. No matter where you go, no matter what you face, I'll always be here, cheering you on. And I know you're going to do amazing things. Leo looked at her, his eyes shining with gratitude. I know, Mom. And I'll never forget everything you've done for me. You've given me so much more than I could ever ask for. You've shown me what it means to be strong, to keep going, to believe in myself. And I'll carry that with me, wherever I go. They sat together in silence, each of them savoring this quiet moment of understanding. There was no need for words. They had already said everything that mattered, and now they simply enjoyed each other's presence, feeling the bond that had carried them through the toughest of times. For Emma, this was a moment she had dreamed of, seeing her son standing on the edge of his future, ready to take on the world with confidence and courage. She knew there would be challenges ahead, that life would have its ups and downs. But she also knew that Leo was ready, that he had everything he needed to face whatever came his way. After a while, Leo stood up, stretching as he looked out the window. The world outside was awake now, filled with the sounds of a new day. Birds chirped in the trees, and the first hints of a summer breeze drifted through the open window. It was a day full of promise, a reminder that life kept moving forward, no matter what. Well, I guess we should get on with our day, Leo said with a small smile, glancing over at his mom. But I'm glad we had this talk, Mom. I didn't know how much I needed it. Emma smiled, feeling a sense of warmth and gratitude. Me too, Leo. I didn't realize how much I needed it, either. Sometimes we keep things inside, thinking we're protecting each other. But in the end, sharing our pain, our worries, it's what brings us closer. Leo nodded, his eyes thoughtful. Yeah, I guess that's something I'm still learning. But I'm glad I could talk to you, Mom. You've always been there, even when I didn't realize it. They hugged, a long, comforting embrace that said everything they couldn't put into words. It was a promise, a silent vow that no matter where life took them, they would always be there for each other. As they pulled apart, Emma looked at Leo with a mixture of pride and bittersweet joy. She knew he was ready to face the world, that he would carry their shared memories and lessons with him. And she was ready, too, to let him go, to watch him soar, knowing he would always carry a piece of her heart with him. Go on, Leo, she said softly, giving him a gentle nudge. Go make today amazing. Leo grinned, his face lit up with a youthful excitement that reminded Emma of the little boy he used to be, filled with dreams and wonder. I will, Mom, I promise. He turned to leave, but then paused at the door, glancing back with a smile. And don't worry, I'll come back and visit. You won't be getting rid of me that easily. Emma laughed, a sound filled with love and joy. I'll hold you to that. Just remember, you'll always have a place here, no matter where life takes you. And with that, Leo left, stepping out into the bright morning, ready to embrace whatever lay ahead. Emma watched him go, feeling a sense of peace and fulfillment. She had done her job, raised her son, and now it was time for him to carve his own path. As she sat there, alone in the quiet room, Emma took a deep breath, letting it all sink in. She thought about everything they had been through. Every challenge, every moment of doubt, every tear and every laugh. And she knew that she wouldn't change a thing. Every experience had brought them closer, had made them who they were, had forged a bond that would last a lifetime. Emma smiled to herself, feeling a sense of pride that was hard to put into words. She knew there would still be hard days, moments when she missed him more than she could bear. But she also knew that they had built something unbreakable, a foundation of love, trust and understanding that would carry them both forward. With a final glance out the window, she whispered, "Thank you, Leo, for being the best part of my life. For showing me what love and strength really mean." And as she stood up, ready to start her own day, Emma felt a sense of calm settle over her. She knew that she was strong, that she had given her son everything he needed to face the world. And she knew, too, that she had everything she needed to continue her own journey, to keep growing, to keep finding joy and purpose in her own life. Because in the end they were a team. Two hearts bound by love, facing the world together and apart, each on their own path, yet forever connected. And as Emma walked through her quiet home, she felt a sense of joy and gratitude, knowing that no matter where life took them, she and Leo would always have each other. Because sometimes the greatest gift we can give and receive is knowing that we're never truly alone. And with that, their story continued, not as an ending, but as a new beginning. A journey filled with hope, resilience and the unbreakable bond of family.